From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
I was told that I have about 40 minutes to share some thoughts with you on my most recent book, Words Not Swords. The book was submitted to Syracuse University Press, my publisher, about 2 years ago. It takes that long for university presses to publish books. If you would allow me not to be modest, and I feel honored that in a way, in that book, I predicted what was happening, what was to happen, both in my country of birth, Iran, and in the Arab world, in the Middle East and North Africa. I predicted that women, in particular women writers, will be at the forefront of a modernizing movement in the Islamic world in general, but in particular in the Middle East and North Africa. And as recent events unfolded in that region, I hope you will agree with me that my prediction was not far from what has happened in that part of the world. So with your permission, what I would like to do today is to focus on, obviously, my book. I'm going to begin still higher. Is it better? Is it better? Can we speak louder? Yes, sure. I will talk first a little bit about what I think is most exciting about the events that are unfolding in the Middle East and North Africa, with just a couple of references. I will put the issue of freedom of movement at the very core of what I call a revolution within the revolutions that is shaking the foundation of the Middle East and the North Africa. And then I will move on to talk about what is most interesting to me, and I hope to you, the role of women writers, in particular, the role of women writers in Iran. So let's start with the beginning of, and I want to say that my talk is not political. I don't do politics, that's not my field. It's cultural and it's gender-based. It's mainly about women and about the culture. As you remember, on June of 2 years ago was the beginning of the Green Movement. And what was really fascinating was the role of women, the predominant role of women in that revolution, in that movement, whatever you want to call it. Soon after that, what has now come to be known the Arab Spring, it started in Tunisia and quickly moved on to other places in the Middle East. And as you can see again, it is the desegregated nature of these demonstrations that is new and novel. Now, in the Islamic Revolution of Iran in 1979, there was a large participation of women in that revolution, but we will get to that. Soon after the revolution, women were asked to go back to where they belong, which is inside the house. It did not happen, but that, nonetheless, was the desire of the ruling elite at the time in Iran. So to me, these overwhelming, unprecedented number of women walking shoulder to shoulder with men has the same significance, symbolic significance, as this man who stood in front of roaring tanks in Tiananmen Square and really was the harbinger of a new era. I think there is a new era that has started in the Middle East and in North Africa. It's a movement that is nonviolent. It's a movement that is based on hope. It's a movement in which words are very powerful. A significant transformation of the representation of women and men in these events is that young women and young men facing batons and bullets with life-affirming words have replaced images of old men screaming death to this and that. And that, I think, is something to be very proud of and something to focus upon. It's no longer about violence. To the contrary, it's a movement that is based on the power of words, that is based on nonviolence, that is trying to change the infrastructure rather than a few politicians on top. I'm going to show you a few iconic images of the last 2 years. This, of course, is Neda Agha Sultan, who was just demonstrating to have her vote counted. And I have heard there is no video that has had as many hits as the unfortunate death of this young woman, a 40 seconds video that has been watched all over the world. And then, of course, this young woman, Mahfouz, Nafsa Mahfouz, the Egyptian woman, who was the one, according to many who started the movement in Egypt, she was the one who said, I'm going to the public square, I'm going to demonstrate, and challenged men to join her. This is a complete reversal of what has been happening in my part of the world. It's often the men and occasionally the women who always wanted to accompany them would accompany them. Here you have a woman challenging men and telling them, come and join me, I'm going there. You need to come and join me. And of course, what I find fascinating, the desire and the attempt of Saudi women who are not allowed to drive to be able to finally sit behind the wheel and claim the roads. And, so I want to take just a very few minutes of your time and to talk about why I think these are so significant, why the presence of women in these public arenas, in these previously all-male territories is so significant. So I want to put it in a global context for just a few short minutes. Look at these symbols of femininity and masculinity. The mirror of Venus, of course, is the sign of femininity. It's a handheld mirror, so women are trapped in their bodies and in notions of beauty. They're attached to the ground. They can't move. You know, there are many positive things about that, but, you know, it's balanced, it's all sorts of things. But from my perspective, which is freedom of movement, this movement, the sign is already telling you that the expectation is that women will be restricted in their physical movement. And I'm just talking about the right to enter a space and to leave it as you wish, whenever you want, however you want to do that. And look at the sign of masculinity, the weapons of Mars. It's unattached, it's upward looking, it can go anywhere it wants. Freedom is freedom of movement, is its prerogative, its right, its privilege. I want to quickly give you a few other examples across the globe. Foot binding in China. Foot binding has incredible similarities to sex segregation, which is the division of space based on gender. You divide the social order into divisions. Men belong to the street, and the streets belong to them. Women belong to the inside, and especially in the last few centuries, up to the middle of the 19th century, I would say from the 11th, 12th century in the Islamic culture to the middle of the 19th century, that rigid division of space became even more rigid. Women were expected to be more and more confined in the private space, the inner sanctum. And there are different definitions of it. Its parameters changed, but that was the place of women. Foot binding did the same thing. It literally cut the feet of women, damaged the bone, made high heels out of bones and muscles and of women, and restricted their movement. The oldest written version of Cinderella comes from China, congruent with the beginning of foot binding around the 10th century. As you know, Cinderella is the most popular fairy tale in the world. There are versions of it in most cultures, but the oldest written version comes from China and comes at a time when they had started foot binding. For a good reason, Cinderella, like many of our beauty icons of beauty, had very tiny little feet. We don't know much about Cinderella other than she had the smallest feet in the country. That's how she went from rags to riches. And of course, Barbie, another icon of beauty. I teach a whole course on Cinderella and Barbie, and it's one of the most popular courses I've ever taught. Barbie has the feet of a 4.5 toddler. She has the body of a tall woman, slim, with huge breasts, probably 1/4 of her weight, but the feet are those of a toddler, 4 to 5 years old. The counter-ideal woman, on the other hand, is the very opposite of a woman who is restricted in her mobility, who is a sleeping beauty, who is a Cinderella with tiny feet. It's the witch who can fly anywhere she wants, the witch who can turn the very symbol of her domesticity, a broom, into an agent of mobility, a vehicle for transportation that can take her anywhere. Witches are old and unsightly and dangerous, but the most important thing about them is that they are the opposite of the ideal of femininity, of the Snow Whites, of the sleeping beauties, of the Ophelia who is dead and in water. And, I can go, perhaps in our Q&A, we'll have time to discuss that, because I want to talk more about Iranian women writers, so I want to move on quickly to what I think has been central to our literary tradition, at least from the perspective of a woman. As you see, freedom of movement for me is at the center of gender equity. Virginia Woolf, one of my most favorite writers, said that a woman needs a room of her own. Well, of course, a woman needs a room of her own, and of course the money she talked about, and the concentrated time to write. But as my dear friend Hale will tell you, a room without the freedom to leave it and to return to it at will is a prison cell. She has experienced it, she knows. That's the difference between a room and a cell. So I add very humbly to Virginia Woolf's fantastic saying that other than a room of one's own, you also need the freedom to leave it and to return to it at will without paying a high price for it. I'm not going to focus on all these other things, although they're really fascinating. I'm just going to focus on how freedom of movement impacts literature and the arts. Persian literature and Persian art in general has been impacted by sex segregation. Let me give you an example of Persian painting, which is one of the arts we Iranians need to be proud of. We have women singers, dancers, women cooking, women serving wine in more than 1,000 years of a glorious tradition of painting. Up to the middle of the 19th century, I have not been able to find a single image of an Iranian woman in the act of reading or writing. That bespeaks a truth. I want to just give you a few examples of how, although in the West too, women did not have as easy an access to writing and reading, but that things are different, and that there are women reading and writing everywhere. There are plenty of such images in Western painting. Now, a caveat. In Iran, we've had women poets going back to very beginning of Persian literature, 11 centuries ago. Rabi'e Ghozdari was contemporaneous with our first well-known poet, Rudaki, and even after that, we have isolated cases of women poets, and I will come back to why I underline poetry. But up to the middle of the 19th century, to be very precise, 1848 for me is a cutoff date, we did not have a tradition of women writers. And by that, I mean successive generations of writers, not isolated cases, generations after generations, women who could refer to their predecessors, women who could learn from, derive support from, have mentors in the generation just preceding them. That did not happen in Iran till the middle of the 19th century. The cutoff date that I refer to, 1848, as you know, is also the year that for many people like me who are very interested in women's movement in different parts of the world is considered by many as the starting point. It's obviously the Seneca Falls Convention, and by many, inside and outside the US, it's considered the beginning of women's movement, advocacy for equity in gender issues. Well, 2 weeks before Seneca Falls Convention, we had a convention almost like it, with 81 men and 1 woman in Iran, in Badasht, Mazandaran, northern part of Iran, in which a woman, also a poet, appropriated male space, became voiced, mobile, with a body and with an individualized voice. She claimed that she's going to refuse to be silenced, invisible, and immobile. So in that congregation of 81 men, she entered the scene of that conference. And of course, as you can imagine, if you are used to a segregated society, the presence of a woman in that all-male territory can be traumatic. In fact, it was. Out of the 81 men present, 1 man wanted to kill her. Another man, a bunch of men covered their eyes with their hands. They could not allow the sanctity of their eyes to be violated by the presence of this woman. 1 man, so there was commotion, and lots of chaos in that congregation. One man, one Abdul Khaliq Isfahani, in whose life I've been very interested. I'm hoping to write his biography, at least in a fictive form. There is not much information. We know very little about him, but he was so distraught. He was so shaken by the presence of this voice, unveiled women. By unveiled, I mean she had her chador on, she had unveiled her face. So, she had her individuality about her. He cut his own throat, and splattered with blood, he left the premises. He disappeared from the scene and from the pages of history. For over 20 years, I've been looking for traces of what happened to his life. I've traveled to Israel, where they have a good record of the event at that conference. I still can't find much about his life, but that's another story altogether. I was at Seneca Falls Convention a couple of years ago, and I was presented for the first time with this image, which almost nobody knows about. It's Stanton, of course, pioneer in women's studies, and Tahireh Qurratol'Ain, the woman who was a poet who entered that male space, and to me is the precursor of modern Persian literature in Iran. I want to read a few lines of her beautiful poetry to you, and then I want to come back and end my talk with that poem, because that poem has taken a fascinating significance in Iran today. This is one of her most anthologized poems, if not the most anthologized, and in Persian, it reads beautifully. I'm sorry, this translation does not do justice to the beauty of the original Persian. I would explain all my grief dot by dot, point by point, if heart to heart we talk and face to face we meet. To catch a glimpse of you, I'm wandering like the wind, from house to house, from door to door, from place to place, from street to street. Separated from you, the blood of my heart gushes from my eyes, in torrent after torrent, river after river, in wave upon wave, stream upon stream. This afflicted heart of mine has woven your love to the stuff of my life, strand by strand, thread by thread. Since I'm focusing on one theme, freedom of movement, you see, movement is at the center of this poem. She's coming one with the wind, she's claiming the streets, she's going from house to house, from street to street. No one can stop her. Like the wind, she's untrappable. Like the wind, she's unstoppable. So, I will just tell you now that the campaign for 1 million signature, which is one of the proudest events in the history of women in Iran in recent couple of centuries, has adopted a phrase from this poem. Without assignation, because Tahireh Qurratol'Ain is considered a heretic inside Iran, and people inside Iran cannot openly reference her. But they've taken those words from her poem and turned it into the motto of their campaign. So, I don't know, what's this noise? I didn't do anything.
It could be a...
Thank you so much. Oh, این میخوره؟ زورم نمیرسه، میخوام. Okay. So I'm just going to focus on freedom of movement to tell you how significant it has been. I have studied Iranian women writers for the last 4 decades. I didn't come to this idea because I believed in some theory and then I implemented it, I applied it to the writing of women. I came to this idea after years of studying their writing. And little by little, I realized that notions of captivity on the one hand, and notions of flight, of open space, of movement, are the two central themes in everything that Iranian women writers have produced in the last 160 years, from poetry to novels, to short stories, to autobiographies, to prison memoirs, and to movies. In the last decade, we have a large number of wonderful women directors who have produced wonderful films. If you look carefully at those movies, there too you would see that the freedom to be desegregated, to go anywhere you want, is the central trope of their work. So I'm just going to give you a few examples of other writers who have focused on that theme. Farzaneh Milani is the first woman who published a collection of poetry during her lifetime in Iran. In the early 20th century, the 1920s, was the first time a woman had published a collection of poetry in her lifetime. Prior to that, all the women we have hundreds of them, have poems published here and there, usually as footnotes to major books. But this one published her own poem. And look at the lines. She said, "Formerly, a woman in Iran was almost non-Iranian. Her vocation was despair, her days shadows. She lived in a cage and died in a cage. The name of this bird was not uttered in the rose garden." You know, of course, Iran is the land of the rose and the nightingale. But the rose in Iranian literature is always feminized, and the nightingale, contrary to Western European literature, in which the nightingale is often male. And even in Greek mythology, in Iran, the nightingale is always male. So the nightingale, in European literature is female, in Persian literature is male. You know, he is winged and he is voiced, and he's the one who has the choice of the rose. And the rose, like the symbol, the mirror of Venus and the weapons of Mars, is the one that is attached and cannot move. And women writers in the last 160 years have desegregated Persian literature. They have said, why isn't the male nightingale singing the praise of the female nightingale rather than the rose, or on top of the rose? Where is the female nightingale? The poem I just read to you from Farzaneh Milani is in reference to that. Where is the female nightingale in a country that is recognized as the land of the rose and the nightingale? So now I have to jump quickly because with time we get more and more women writers. Forough Farrokhzad, most iconic women poets in Iran probably today. I wrote my dissertation on Forough Farrokhzad more than 3 decades ago. And I have come to the conclusion that captivity and flight are the two central tropes of everything she has done. She has written short stories, she has written a travel narrative, she has done a fantastic film, 22 minutes film about a leper colony. But even that film is called, the title of which is The House is Black, which is about leprosy, and is one of the top best 10 documentaries made ever in the world. Not by according to me, but according to those who are in the field and know that. Even that film focuses on imprisonment, on this feeling of being trapped, of not being able to go where you want. If you have not seen that film, may I suggest you take a look at it. I wish we had the time to watch it together. It is a masterpiece. But Forough Farrokhzad's poetry, from beginning to end, focused on feeling trapped and the desire to flight. Of course, this is one of her most famous poems, Why Should I Stop? Why? The birds have gone off to find waterways. The horizon is vertical and moving is rocketing. Shining planets spin at the edge of sight. Why should I stop? Why? This was the motto of Forough Farrokhzad's life. Why should she stop? And she never did. Ironically and sadly for Iranian literature and world literature in a way, she was stopped in a speeding car. She died at the age of 32 in a car accident. She was speeding in a car and she was stopped by a wall. Wall was the title of the second book she wrote as an obstacle to movement. And her first poetry collection, please listen to the title of her 5-volume of poetry, Captive, Wall, Rebellion, Rebirth, and Let Us Believe in the Dawning of a Cold Season, which was published posthumously. So I will come back to a poet who is alive, who is in Iran, and who is cause for pride for all women and all Iranian Simin Behbahani. I will end my presentation with her, but I also want to give you a sense of what's happening with fiction writing in Iran in the last century. Scheherazade, the ultimate storyteller, is from our part of the world. She is the woman who cured her husband, the king, who was a serial killer, through words. She did not resort to violence to take care of the situation that was most violent. She thought, you don't respond to a violent situation with violence. She recognized the futility of violence, and she relied on words. And indeed, she succeeded. She cured her husband. So storytelling and private forms of art have been the domain of women in Iran, and they have excelled at it. I want to recognize that. But my focus today is on written forms of art, on public forms of art. And in fact, one reason women poets go back to over 100 years in Iran is because poetry is at the verge of a public and a private form of art. You can produce poetry at home. You don't need an orchestra. You don't need anything other than a piece of paper and a pen. The production of it is of course, public. But the same cannot be said about music, about sculpture, about cinematography and photography and the rest of them. So what about fiction writing in Iran? Fiction writing in Iran did not begin in earnest till the 1930s. It's kind of late, for a culture that has had storytelling mainly by women. But we did not have many women writers, women novelists. But things have changed drastically and very quickly. You see if I have, first show you. I don't have it here. I can't go back, I'm sorry. You can't go back on these, you can? Previous, oh. Okay, thank you. Okay, let me just tell you that right now we have about 370 women novelists in Iran. It is about 13 times as much as it was about 10 years ago. And these are not women who are just writing something. Some of them are the bestsellers in Iran. In fact, the average number of books for novels in Iran, the average number is about 5,000, which is not much. There are many women writers who sell in the hundreds of thousands. In fact, in post-revolutionary period and in pre-revolutionary period, 2 women writers were the ones who had one of the 2 most best-selling novels in Iran, Savashun, which is the title of the poem by Simin Daneshvar, and Bamdad Khomar, The Morning After, by Hajset Javadi. That last one, after the revolution, has sold more than 300,000 copies. Let me quickly go over some statistics. You're here, meaning that I should end, right?
No, I'm here to help you. Go ahead, take your time.
Okay.
I'm here to help with the
Oh, thank you. Look at the number of translators. 1997, we had 214 of them, which is by far more than we had a decade before, and so on. In 2003, we have 708 of them. Number of women working in publishing industry, from 700 to over 2,000. Number of women publishers. And I can tell you, I know a couple of them. They really make a difference, because these 307 women novelists, these women poets, are not only desegregating Persian literature in terms of those who are writers, they're desegregating also the themes of our literature. Now, feminine concerns have become major concerns. The role of brothers, addiction of husbands, depression of women, postpartum depression, issues that you would rarely come across with. Furugh Farrokhzad has become the iconic woman that she has because she incorporated for the first time some of these themes in Persian literature. And now you see it on such large scale that it's hard to keep up with the writing of women writers in Iran. And these women publishers really do make a difference. Now we have a record number of women writers and filmmakers. We have a record number of internet users, which is putting Iran in dialogue with the rest of the world. If you look at anthologies of women writers, global anthologies of women writers, up to a decade ago, there is rarely a reference to Iranian women writers, be they poets, be they novelists. Some of it is, of course, based to the fact that we had few of them. But then we had some fantastic novelists. But we were not in touch. We were not in dialogue with the rest of the world. We had very few translations of these wonderful masterpieces. And with the internet, something has changed. My own writing, and I am a Muslim woman, but my own writing, because I have written about a Baha'i woman, was not allowed to be published in Iran. The internet changed that. Now people have access to my writing, even some in translation, some in English. And women who are writing in diaspora are now finding an incredibly amazing market for their work inside Iran. I just want to give you a couple of examples. Homa Sarshar wrote a biography of Shaban Jafari, a major figure in the CIA, 1953 events in Iran. It sold 7,000 copies in the whole country in the USA. And Homa Sarshar is a known journalist outside of, probably one of the best well-known women journalists. In spite of all that, 7,000 copies. The book was allowed to be published in Iran. It went through 16 printing inside the country. So there is now a two-way dialogue, which is a real dialogue going on, and I'm very excited about that. There is a strong presence of women in Iranian blogosphere, and it is truly exciting what is happening there. This is a reference to Shirin Ebadi and the significance of words, to just say that I'm not the only one. Many have discussed the power of words, how words are indeed most powerful weapons, more powerful than bombs and guns. So I said that I want to go back when I talked about Tahir Qurratul Ain to campaign for 1 million signature. You know, it was a campaign, a grassroots campaign that began in Iran in a most desegregated fashion. There are men and women involved. There are traditionally veiled and forcefully veiled women involved, young and old, literate and illiterate, secularists and devout Muslims involved in that movement. And to me, that's good news. That's the way it should be. Grassroots movements rather than from up down, from down up. And the campaign for 1 million signature is one such movement. It's nonviolent civil society disobedience. And they have used, as I told you, their motto is street to street, face to face. Remember that poem I read to you from Tahir Qurratul Ain? That's a line of her poetry. So to leave time for Q&A, and I want to end with Simin Behbahani. For the first time in the glorious history of Iranian literature, we have a woman as our national poet, not recognized necessarily by the government as the national poet, but recognized by the people of Iran, both inside and outside the country, as their national hero. She has been given so many names: the lioness of Iran, the voice of resistance, the face of dissident, all that. But she has been writing for over 6 decades. She is in her 80s now, not in good health, unfortunately, almost lost her vision. But she's still writing. She's still inspiring Iranians inside and outside the country. And I want to end with this beautiful poem of hers, which is one of her more recent ones. It's longer than the few lines I have here. My poems are my sword. They are mightier than any sword. Though they can cut deep, my fine weapon is not for bloodshed. So to return to how I started my presentation to you, these desegregated demonstrations in the Arab Spring, in the Green Movement in Iran, this desegregation of Persian literature in terms of its producers, of its themes, and its consumers is good news. This means women and with men who support them, and there are plenty of them, are moving toward moderation and modernization. This revolution within revolution is good news for all of us. Thank you for listening.
Thank you again, Dr. Milani. This has been a wonderful, fascinating talk. I've enjoyed it a lot. And I also forgot to mention earlier that we have copies of Dr. Milani's recent book, Words Not Swords, sitting right back there. And she will be available to help sign any copies if you care to purchase one. For the question and answer section, and just be aware that if you're going to ask a question, you're being filmed, and that we may subsequently webcast this and it'll be on the internet. So by asking a question, you're consenting to being filmed and you're giving us permission to put you on online. Thank you very much. And if you have any questions for Dr. Milani, please go ahead and ask. I only ask you to repeat the question here because we don't have microphones out there. Thank you.
Sure, I'll be happy after what you heard, probably there are going to be no questions. No questions? Okay, and yes.
No, I didn't want to, I wanted to ask you, I want to thank you for this wonderful presentation. Really, it is exciting. And as you're pointing out, the changes are taking place. And one of the major changes has been the greater involvement of women in the changes that are coming in. Do you see them as bringing a new style, a new voice in the whole region, in the entire region? How do you perceive this new role?
Yes, thank you. I should repeat that, right? It was a great question. Thank you. Thank you for coming. You honor me with your presence. And the question was, do I think that the overwhelming presence of women, the unprecedented presence of women in these demonstrations is having an impact on how the events are unfolding? Does it have a strategic relevance and importance? I think it really does. I think it's a great question. I need to study it a lot more, and since I'm keeping away from politics, and for 40 years I've worked on literature, I want to confine myself to that. I recognize that my answer will not be a political answer because I'm not qualified, yes. But as an observer and as a literary critique, as someone who's been interested in social movements, in women's movement, I think their presence, first of all, is changing the visual, the social, and the political landscape of the country. One of the rulers, I think it was the ruler of Yemen, who said, what are these women doing in these public squares? You are dishonoring your families. And then the next day, there were 10 times more women everywhere. So it is reallocating space. It is reallocating power. It is reallocating the public discourse. Is telling women that women in the Middle East, in the Islamic world, in the North Africa, have always been powerful. One of the reasons I was interested in women studies some 40 years ago was because when I became Iranian when I left Iran. It's a cliche. So I wanted to learn more about my country. I started reading more books about Iran. And the more I read, the more baffled I was. Who are these people talking about? I don't see my mother in any of these books. I don't see my aunts and grandmother and women friends in Iranian women, the ones that at the time I was most interested in, were very powerful. But it was a different kind of power. It was power inside the house, in the private domain. Now we see a redefinition of power too. These women are bringing their managerial know-how, and they are fantastic managers, to the public domain. They're bringing their voice. They're bringing their desire for nonviolence. I'm not saying men are violent, women are never for violence. But I'm saying because they've been kept away from the public domain, from the world of money and politics and whatnot, they are more interested in nonviolence resolution. They're more interested in negotiating things. Now, I end veils and words, words, not swords, with a comparison of the story of Shahrazad, the storyteller, with one of Iran's most famous proverbs. There is a proverb in Iran that says, kill the cat on the nuptial night. For years, I kept asking myself, but the nuptial chamber, especially in a culture like mine, is the beginning of intimacy. It's the beginning of a moment of love and shared union. Why blood and mayhem and killing at that threshold? I couldn't find the answer to it. I kept researching and asking people and asking people. So finally I found the answer. You know, all Iranian proverbs, like all proverbs everywhere, have a story behind them. It started with a story. It's a very simple story. It's the taming of the shrew. You have it all over the world. So in Iran, the story goes like that. There is this woman, very rich, but a shrew. No one could control her, and no one wanted to marry her. But there was a lot of money too, and finally when the parents saw that she's getting older and older and there is no one to marry, they promised more and more. Finally, this bully said, I'm going to marry her. And everybody told her, are you crazy? Are you nuts? You don't want to do that. She's a shrew. He said, don't worry, I'll take care of her. So they got married, and when they were in the nuptial chamber, he had arranged for a cat to be taken to the nuptial chamber. So, you know, as they started to do what newlywed couples do, he looked at the cat and he said, go get me a glass of water. You know, the poor cat didn't know what was going on. She just meowed blissfully and flickered her tail and walked around. The groom repeated the command, go fetch me a glass of water, got a little louder. The third time, he took his dagger out, and he said, if you don't go get me a glass of water right now, I will cut your head off. Well, you know, we know what the cat did. He couldn't. So very proudly, he went to the cat in the nuptial chamber, beheaded the cat, and with the bloody dagger in his hand, said to his wife, he said, you know what, honey, I'm thirsty. You go get me a glass of water. You know, in that claustrophobic space, with a bloodthirsty groom on her hand, with a dagger, what could she do? She got up and she went and she got a glass of water, and the pattern was set. The whole town was shocked and surprised. Wow, they said, is it that easy to tame a shrew? So in the neighborhood, there was this poor man who's been oppressed by his wife for 20 years. And he blamed himself. He said, why in the world didn't I think of that? So he got himself a big kitchen knife. He went to the bedroom and took their cat, and as soon as they got into their bed, he looked at the cat with the knife in his hand. He said, you go get me a glass of water right this minute. The wife knew better, looked at him. He said, honey, the one who killed the cat at the nuptial chamber, not after 20 years of marriage. Now you want a glass of water, honey, go get it. And while you're there, why don't you get me a glass of water? I compared this with another iconic nuptial chamber in Iranian culture, Shahrazad, the storyteller. She went to a nuptial chamber with a bloodthirsty husband, a serial killer, who was full of anger and revenge. Instead of taking a dagger and an innocent cat, she took with her her words, her stories. She was patient, she was a psychologist, I recognize all of these, but after 1001 nights, she changed the rule of the game. Violence was no longer the response to the problems. So I think the presence of women, the overwhelming presence of women, is going to change the political, the social, and the literary landscape of our country. It is going to be against all form of extremism. It's not going to allow that to flourish any further. It's good news.
For those of us who don't speak Iranian, how do we, the language, how do we find the names of these authors and locate English translations of their books?
Yes. I have, I'm sure the library has them, so you don't have to buy them. But there are many books, so forgive me for being so self-serving. But I have a previous book that was published 20 years ago, Veils and Words. It's all about Iranian women writers, and it has a rather inclusive bibliography. And this last book, Words Not Swords, is up to the post-revolutionary period, has names, has all the available translation. I'm sorry to disappoint you. We don't have too many translations, but hopefully it's going to change. Yes.
Since the Green Revolution, has there been an increase in women enrolling formally in courses for creative writing or journalism in order to express their voices?
I didn't hear the first
As maybe from the Green Revolution, we started the movement. Has there been a lot of women enrolled in the English literature?
Okay.
Creative writing class.
In journalism and other ways to
Inside Iran?
Yes.
It's not only after the Green Revolution, Green Movement, I'm sorry. You know, I always say the Islamic Republic of Iran had a collateral benefit. We always talk about collateral damages. I think we can also talk about collateral benefits. Not all of it. You know, the Islamic Republic of Iran is not a homogeneous group. There are different factions within it. But in the early years of the revolution, the desire of the ruling elite was to push women back to where they belonged, inside the house. They did not succeed. One, because women had already, you know, we have the history of fighting, struggling for human rights in Iran, for women's rights, goes 160 years ago. Tahireh Qurratu'l-Ain is the first woman in the whole Islamic world that I know that stepped into a male territory, that unveiled her voice and her body, her face. So there is this long history, and during the Pahlavi era, there were lots of steps forward for women. The right to vote, the right to travel freely, at least within Iran, and many others. So there was already this group of women who, I always say, once the genie is out of the bottle, it's much harder to put it back in. So Iranian women were already out of the bottle. But two major things also happened after the revolution. Because the Islamic Revolution, the Islamic Republic, segregated public spaces. Women were asked to cover themselves. You know, it's like carrying a portable house with you wherever you go. You are still a private individual. The streets still don't belong to you. Universities were segregated, beaches were segregated, buses were segregated. The mayor at the time, who is the president of Iran now, segregated elevators. There were men's elevators, women's elevators. You know, we can see the negative connotations of it, but there was also collateral benefit to that. Many religious families who would have otherwise not allowed their daughters to go to institutions of higher education, to enter the workplace, to enter universities and hospitals and whatnot, allowed their daughters to do so. Right now, 64% of all students in Iran in institutions of higher education are women. If you do a quick calculation, that leaves 36% for men. Iran is the only country in the world that is contemplating affirmative action for men. So yeah, things started changing, have been progressing. I don't think it's a revolution in women's desegregation. It's a progression, but it took a leap forward in spite of the ruling elite's desire. And now we have women. I mean, if you go to Iran, you will be surprised by the presence of women everywhere. Haleh Esfandiari has written, and I think it's one of the first books about the role of women in Iranian politics. What was the name? Constructed Lives, yes, about all the women who took part in Iranian politics after the revolution. I don't think anyone had devoted a whole book to that subject. And we know their presence, their voice, their vision makes a difference in the political discourse. And it has. And it's getting more and more. Okay, thank you, Liz, for listening.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.